joining us for our November 9th regular agenda setting conference. And so we will call on Commissioner Tony Stewart to do the invocation and the pledge. Commissioner Stewart.
God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your kindness, your goodness, your mercy. We thank you, God, for just being God. God, we pray that as we get started in our meeting, God, that you would give us wisdom and guidance, God. God, I pray that we will do the best that we can by the citizens of Cumberland County, God. Help us to meet their needs. Help us to do what it is that we're called to do. And for this, God, we say thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of announcements. One, our chairman, Chairman Evans, had a conflict and could not be here with us today. And Commissioner Lancaster also allowed us to know that he would not be here today because of a conflict. But I would like to take this opportunity to, it's Veterans Day, and we won't be here on that day, but we have Commissioner Keith and Commissioner Evans who have served and were veterans, and for all the veterans in the room, we say thank you for your service. It allowed Mike and I to do what we do and all the rest of us. And also, my wife's a veteran, so I go without saying that, to the family members. Because, when when my wife was in the Navy, they always talked about the hardest job was the Navy wife. Ooh, it was tough. But to all the family members of veterans, we also applaud you all when they go off and you have to keep the home front and everything burning. So to all our veterans and veterans families, thank you so very much for your service. I don't know if you want to say anything, Commissioner Keith, as the only veteran here.
It was an honor to serve.
All right, thank you. That will take us to the approval of the agenda. Madam Manager, are there any changes to the agenda? Commissioners, are there anything to be changed or moved? Second. It's been moved and second that we approve the agenda. All of those in favor?
Unanimous.
All righty. That takes us to the approval of our minutes of the October 14, 2021 agenda setting. Regular meeting minutes, those were provided to you by email and they're online. If I can entertain a motion if there's no changes to that.
Move that we approve the agenda session minutes. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Council, seconded by Commissioner Stewart. All of those in favor?
Unanimous.
All right, thank you. That takes us to our presentations, which is the Crown Complex Capital Planning. I will go to the manager for her update.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. As you may recall, at our October agenda session, we talked about the next steps based on the financial feasibility study that was conducted as a result of our goal to replace the Crown Theater and Arena. And so that one of those next steps was to consult with our financial advisor. And so I think everyone in the room is familiar with our financial advisor, DEC Associates, Inc. They have worked for the county for several years. They led us through the development of the capital planning model. And so today, I am pleased to have Doug Carter and Andrew Carter here today. Doug's going to walk us through. They have reviewed the financial piece of the feasibility study, and they have incorporated that data into the Crown Center capital planning model. So with that, Mr. Carter, if you'll walk us through the Crown model and how the financial feasibility fits.
We welcome the Carters, and Carter Senior knows how we do business.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I probably talk pretty loud without the microphone, but here goes. Happy to be here again. It's been a while. It's nice to wear a coat and tie again. It's nice to see people in person again. I will tell you this, in riding into the county from where we were coming, you can just certainly see the growth and change that's occurring. And we had an early lunch in downtown, and what a lovely, lively place that has become. So glad to be back. As you know, we're here today to discuss the Crown Complex model and a review of where the financials are on that. So we're going to spend most of our time on that, on the summary page of that model. Most of you have seen that model before. And so,
Now, Mr. Carter, just to let you know, Commissioner Stewart is new to the board. She's probably never met you all. This is Commissioner Stewart, because she was not here when we started this. I don't think you've been back since. She's been here. And so introduce you to Commissioner Stewart, and thank you for leaving some money in our county. Smart man.
absolutely. Okay. We're going to run through this kind of quick, but it always helps to look at background and where we've come from and where we're headed. The county has been well accomplished as a capital planner. We've discussed that a number of times with you in the past. There's been a CIP for many years. In 2018, the county commission put into place a community investment fund. That's a very big benchmark and a very good thing to do when you're a capital planner like the county. That CIF, the Community Investment Fund, allows you to carry on your long-term planning and allocate specific resources to capital improvements. Obviously, you see the CIF annually. Essentially, inside your capital planning model, there is a general capital model, and there's the Crown Complex model. And so for today, we're going to give most of our attention, if not all, to the Crown Complex model. I'll say one final thing about this. These models are living. They change every year. They're updated annually for actual dollars. All assumptions inside the models are also reviewed annually, and we spend a great deal of time with your finance director and your manager in looking at these models to make sure they adequately reflect where we all think we are. Now, what is produced from all of this? What are the outcomes? Obviously, improved efficiency and looking at your priorities. You set aside these capital funds inside your CIF. This is very strongly perceived as a way to operate by the North Carolina Local Government Commission and by rating agencies who rate you. As you know, the county is very highly rated. And then finally, it gives a way to look at affordability and whether or not there is a proper match between operating and capital allocation of funds. So good job for the county.
And can I ask Mr. Carter one thing, and I think you kind of glossed over it, but for everybody else, our bond rating for the county is one of the highest. It's very, very good.
That is correct.
And which allows us to borrow money at a lower, I think it's important for people to kind of understand that.
That's correct. You have one notch below the highest rating given. And the county manager and the county finance director have tasked all of us, especially as we move forward in other borrowing activities in the future, to really sell where the county is, how well you have survived COVID, what good job you've done in planning, and where you come out of this. And so that is constantly on our mind to retain and upgrade that credit rating as possible.
And there's very few people at that very top. It's a
Very
small,
few, yes.
very small. So for us to be right below that is extraordinary to the staff and what they've done and what they've accomplished, and our financial staff for that. I think it's just important for them to know that as we move forward with all the things that we've got planned out. Thank you.
It's very important. Talk a bit about the Crown Complex model itself. As a presenter, I like to tell you what you're going to hear when you see the model, so this is what this is all about. When you see a model and there's a lot of numbers and you think, what does all that mean? So we're going to tell you what it means to start with. And then we'll go to the model itself and answer your questions as necessary. Inside your Crown model are all the dedicated revenues that specifically fund the Crown Complex model. And I will say to you, in many respects, this operates like an enterprise. It has its own revenues, it has its own expenses, it has its own fund equity position. And moving inside that model is done in the same way as an enterprise. It needs to pay for itself. That's been the goal that we've been given in this. Two, the expenditures include all the operating and the debt service inside the Crown Complex. And you'll see in a moment the new event center operating revenues and expenditures have been incorporated into this model out of the feasibility study. We have used inside the model a cost of $80 million, which is towards the high range, at the high range. So we've incorporated the $80 million cost for that facility, and we show it as debt funded, and we'll go through that in a minute. One thing I will say that it does not include, and there's still some questions we're working on this, is value and parking cost. And that will not be able to be fully determined until locational issues and others have been settled with respect to the event center facility. But we did go to the high end of the construction range. Also included inside the model is Paygo into the future for maintenance and updates to the facilities, the existing ones and the new event center. That will get evaluated every year as to the adequacy of those numbers. Should we up them? We just finished that process recently. We believe the revenues and expenditures are prudently estimated for the entire complex, and we have utilized the numbers inside the study for the new facility. And we'll describe for you in a minute when you look at the model what are the impacts of those new numbers, and do they have significant impact on the model. I'll just say to you in advance, they do not. If the facility broke even rather than creating a profit, it does not overly impact this model. Out of the operations, but the model will sustain itself. We did not include in this model, and we've talked about this, commissioners, before, as we talked about this facility. There are no private fundraising numbers included inside this estimate. I'll give you an example, and I gave this to you the last time we discussed this. We were advisors to the city of Greensboro on their new $85 or so million facility in downtown. Now, that was an extraordinary effort on private fundraising, but it was 50% funded privately. Now, whether it's 10%, 20%, 50%, any private funding that could come to the table here only improves the status of this model. And I would just encourage, as I'm sure you would, having the community invest themselves in this facility, where it is, its quality, that sort of thing. Finally, I will say, when you see the model, we believe that there are positive fund balance results, that you can finance the $80 million, continue to pay operating costs on the current complex facilities that will survive this, and to look into the future for Paygo monies to keep the facilities hopefully in good form. And then I think the big issue is there are no general fund contributions inside this model in order to make it operate. So it is an enterprise in that it operates on its own revenues and its own expenditures.
And I would just think either you or the manager, because a lot of people may not know what enterprise is. And you keep using enterprise, people may not know that, but that's, it basically pays for itself. If you could at least explain that. Because you've thrown out that term a couple of times, so.
Thank you, sir, for keeping me straight. In governmental entities, there are general governments and there are enterprise activities. Most of us know an enterprise activity like a water and sewer fund or an airport. And those are facilities that typically exist off their own revenues and their own fees and do not use general government contributions. In this case, your Crown Center complex operates like that enterprise, has its own revenues, has its own expenditures, and operates out of those. So that's why I make it akin to an enterprise fund. Thank you. Okay, thank you, sir. So now what I'll do, basically, after telling you that we think the model is in good shape, I'm going to ask Andrew to take you through. We have provided you a summary page for all the commissioners here who have seen this before. The summary page has everything on it, and then we'll answer whatever questions you have.
So as Doug said, we told you what we're getting ready to show you. So here's the actual numbers that reflect the outcomes that we gave you. As you'll see in the far left-hand column, as you start in the model, we start first with revenues, right? So you'll see the hotel motel tax, the food and beverage tax. Those are the two revenues that are dedicated in this enterprise system to pay for the Crown Complex system. You'll note between 24 and 25, there's a relatively large jump between 9.3 million and 11.6 million. That's the increase of the revenues coming into the new multi-purpose event center that has been identified in the feasibility study that was provided to you. So you'll see that's the jump of when the facility is in operation and is starting to produce its own revenues from ticket sales and other fees. Of course, the next column transfers in. That again shows you there's no transfers in from any other sources, either general fund or other. We might add a column there for private activity or other revenues that might come in once we start identifying those. So you'll see then we have our total revenue. Right now about 8.5. This budget year is about 9.5 million in total revenues coming in. And then we get into our expenditures. And the expenditures start with what's our currently issued debt service. So this is debt service for the current Crown Complex that has been outstanding. You'll see a majority of that debt falls off between fiscal year 24 and 25. We have a nice, almost $2 billion pay down, and then you'll see it drops again. So most all the debt is getting ready to drop off between 24 and 25. That lines up very nicely with the current plans from the study of when we might issue the debt for the new multi-purpose event center. And you'll see we estimate the first year of debt service in fiscal 25 of around $3.2 million. That lines up very nicely from the debt falling off from the previous year and doesn't have as big an effect on the model as if the debt came on faster. The next column is the operations. These are what you pay out to the Spectrum people to operate the current Crown Complex, as well as the operations identified in the feasibility study that was given. So you'll see again, between 24 and 25, there's a jump, and that's the increase in operations due to the new event center. I will note that we have not adjusted a lot of the operations on the current Crown Complex in the model to be a little bit more prudent and conservative. If there are savings by possibly shutting down or not having certain facilities of the current complex now when the new event center goes in, we have not programmed that in, but that possibly could be a place where there may or may not be savings depending on negotiation of contracts at the current complex. And then we have Paygo projects and transfer. Those are the identified Paygo and CIP projects. In the first 5 years, I believe that's what's in the CIP program currently for the Crown Center, and then we project after that. So you'll see we do put in a pretty consistent amount of Paygo projects to help keep not only the Crown Complex facilities, but also the maintenance and Paygo that might have to happen at the new event center, eventually roofs and paint and other things will have to happen. So we've attempted to provide that cost in the model to capture it into the future. So you'll see between our revenues and our expenditures, most years we are producing some sort of quote-unquote profit, which falls into the capital fund. In a couple of the years, in the red numbers, you'll see those are the years we'll have to use cash out of our fund in order to pay for the expenses in that year. But we're able to do that with healthy fund balance levels. You'll see even though they drop, we're in very healthy coverage levels as we get further into the future. We're all fancy in here. I got too close to it. I do want to point out over here, the study identified operating income. This is what was identified in the study as far as possible profit as identified in the study. We have, as we mentioned, have done a sensitivity of what if this does not exist and we break even, the model still stays healthy and stays within our fund balance coverage targets that we've set. So we've attempted to capture all the expenses that we know of and project out, and attempted to be very prudent on our revenue expansions. you'll see that, fiscal '22 is technically lower than fiscal '21. That's based on budget numbers rather than actuals. And so when '22 comes in fully, we will put in the '22 numbers and hope they'll be higher than what's projected. Any questions? I'll run through it relatively quickly.
Andrew, can I make 2 comments?
Everybody ahead.
Before we do that, the revenues, Andrew mentioned it, I'll show it to you, very good, less than we collected. I think that gives us capacities here that we decided not to bump the model based upon actual results. And so you will know the issuance of this debt, we have estimated at 4%. And to give you a comparison, we stepped in here a few minutes later than we thought to meet with management. We were completing a financing for the city of Charlotte, which sold today at 12 o'clock. And to tell you where interest rates are, I keep hearing they're going to rise, and I fear they are. But today, the city of Charlotte issued 20-year GO bonds for 1.63 interest rate, which is the lowest they have paid in modern times. We couldn't go back but about 25 or 30 years to find it. So my point is, our 4% is well ahead of where interest rates are now. So when you couple the expense side, which is primarily the interest rates, with some prudence on the revenue side, all of that contributes to what we believe would be greater dedicated fund balances than are reflected here, assuming we stay within our capital cost.
So I need to go borrow my money now, right now, and hold it and put it in the fund or whatever. Mr. Keith, Commissioner Keith, I need to have to look at his hand.
Speaking of your, welcome back. Good to see you here.
Thank you.
Speaking of Charlotte, did that say bond rating we did?
One notch above.
Okay, so that could be, that could be a difference.
It could be a difference. You are so highly perceived. North Carolina is such a credit sterling quality state, there would be not a lot.
Okay, but you believe those same rates are out there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to go to, if you allow me, Mr. Chair, I want to go to the hotel motel food and beverage tax number. I'm going to make an assumption here that 20 and 21 were based off actual numbers.
That is correct.
Okay, and then speculative going up. And, okay, so.
If we go with the budget in 22, which is the lower experience in 21.
Okay. This takes into consideration 100% of the food and beverage tax and only our 25% that goes to debt service for the local occupancy tax. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Now, when you did this model, we all understand when the presentation came in by CSL, I was pleased by so many things, but the thing that I was pleased the most about was that they felt very strongly that this facility could operate at a profit because of its uniqueness. Now, when we did this model and you're showing the operating income and the positives down there, we're not taking into consideration other debt that's coming from the other facilities at the Crown Area.
No, and let me just make this comment so that we all make sure that we understand. When we talk about profit, we're talking about an operating profit. The facility will not pay its debt service. That's why we have other dedicated revenues. So yes, it would be a profit in operation.
For only this facility.
For only this facility. But we have included on the cost of the other. So all the costs are.
Because it will be pretty much free and clear at the end of this.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, your numbers sort of get a little different here in fiscal year June 2023. The pay-as-you-go projects, and maybe you can clarify that a little bit, they take this escalation very fast and then they drop. Can you tell me what the reasoning behind that was?
So, Commissioner Keith, I'd like to address that. So there are some significant projects related to the ADA and projects that have not been completed because that facility is over 20 years old, and there's some significant projects that need to be done to make it more marketable in the community for events. The panel replacement, furniture replacement, carpet in the hospitality suites. And so we've put this off as we have paid down the debt, and we really want to put some money into the facility to keep it current.
Okay, so obviously we're only talking about the Coliseum and the Expo now.
Absolutely.
Okay. I had one other one, you took me off my game a little bit, Mr. Newman. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, go ahead.
You're the only one that has some questions there, Mr. Keith.
Well,
Anybody got that?
can I say my takeaway is that we can fund it?
That is
I
correct.
think that's what they think.
You can, assuming the assumptions come true. It's a model based upon assumptions, which is why we use the high capital cost, we use higher interest rates, lower growth rates and revenues.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I remember now. You're showing debt left, the debt up to June 2022 is already taken care of. So what the debt left on that facility right now is about 12 million, does that sound right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, 12, 13 million. Okay, so that's what we got. We could borrow against future earnings. I'm sorry, the current issued debt service, the 3 years have already gone by, so we're just. Yeah. Okay. So can we borrow against future earnings on food and beverage and hotel occupancy?
Well, we can, but when you factor, as you look at the fund balance, when you factor in the $80 million borrowing, for a time period, you can see we stabilize the fund balance in 2027, and then the fund balance begins to grow again. As the fund balance grows, that gives additional capacity.
Okay. Right. Seems like we're going to have a little bit of a crossover, a bridge where we're going to be funding
Yes, sir.
the one and then trying to build the other, and the recommendation is that fund balance will be used. Is that right? Is that what I call that?
That is correct. When you look at the fund balance usages, it's largely driven, not entirely, but largely driven by the Paygo
Okay.
and making the current facilities that will be retained at the Crown Center complex more up to date, as the county manager mentioned. So essentially, a lot of that capital fund use is oriented towards getting all the facilities in the right place. And thankfully, because y'all set this fund up and put money in it, and that money didn't find itself in another place which we couldn't find, you have the money available to make these investments.
Thank you.
That was part of the good decision y'all made on that.
I appreciate, anyone else have any other questions? That was for information as we go forward with the information. Thank you so much for bringing us to good news. So thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Thank you, Henry. All right. Madam Manager, that will take us to the update of the registered deeds, the new vault doorway project.
Yes, sir. And we have some current bid results, and I would ask our county engineer, Mr. Jermaine Walker, to present this item.
Can I ask a question on this just beforehand? And it has nothing, you go ahead and set yours up. And I see that we're taking this out of our CIP and all of that. But I looked at it, in terms of moving it from going through that main door, and you're gonna have a separate entrance. Could we not use ARP funds and it's COVID related because you don't want all those folk walking past there, as opposed to taking it out of this fund? That's just a question I asked, I mean, because what happens is, from my understanding, everybody walks through that main door to get down to the vault. So you got people standing in line and everything. I got the registered deeds here. So doing this will move them away from that. So couldn't we put that as COVID related so that you don't have all these people within 6 feet of each other? So it may be ARP as opposed to doing it this way. I just throw that out. I don't know before you get started because it makes sense, but.
We can look at it. I don't remember how much of this was in the works before March 3rd. And
We just did the budget, budget
In
request
August.
in June.
We started this in June.
We started in June. Yeah, we started out there. And that has nothing to do with your project, Mr. Walker. I'm just saying how to finance it, so.
We can, that's a good idea. We'll certainly look at that I'll look at these plans in detail so we can work out. It sounds doable.
Well, I'm just trying to save as much money in that CIP budget as we can and not use that. But I'm sorry. So, Madam Manager, I'll take it to you.
Yes, sir. So I will ask Mr. Walker to tell you about the bid process, and we are right now facing about a $37,000 shortfall. The board was very specific that to only use $50,000, so that's why we're back here today. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. Good afternoon, Board. This, as everyone alluded to, this project was a shared cost to fund the construction of a vault doorway for the Register of Deeds. This doorway would provide a secondary egress and allow the public and the attorneys to access the records vault without having to use the Register of Deeds main entrance. This project was approved by the Board of Commissioners not to exceed $100,000 with approximately $50,000, as you said, Commissioner Adams, to come out of the CIP fund. And so, going through the bid process, this project was put out for bid twice. The first bid came in a little under $100,000, but that bid was disqualified because they were an ineligible bidder. So we put it out for bid again. The bid came back at $125,000. And so, keeping with the guidance from the board, with $12,000 in planning and design costs, we now have a $37,000 shortfall. And so staff is seeking guidance as to whether the Board of Commissioners wants to move forward by increasing the not to exceed amount to meet the $125,000 cost, or issue some, how you want us to proceed with the project.
I guess you may want to explain, because they said there's a block for a door, but you got to go through the wall.
Okay, so if you take a look at so this is the main hallway outside of our Register of Deeds area. This is the main entrance here. If you can see what these stanchions are. So the project would calls for us to open up.
Hit it again, and maybe it'll come back to clear.
A double door opening
Yeah, there you go.
here, almost approximately where these chairs are. And then that would give the Register of Deeds access, or public access, and allow the attorneys to enter and exit without having to go through the store. Located on this wall, you have these record-keeping shelves, and then on this southern wall here, you have, of course, a pre-existing doorway, but that's covered up by a wall unit that has computers, desktop computers, to where the general public can come in, access it, and print off records that have been scanned.
Do you want to address maybe the portion of the bid that was it steel that went out, or the portion of the bid?
So what's really driving the cost up, if you take a look at this flooring, this terrazzo flooring is very hard to find because this building was built in the late 70s. You have to go and find the terrazzo that's going to match this. This is about $20,000 of the cost. So the terrazzo flooring, and then also having to work a reverse schedule is also what's driving up the cost, because we have to work at night so that we don't disturb the court's process that's going on, because it becomes a dust and safety and noise issue.
And the reason I talk about the COVID kind of relationship is that where that door is, when the court system is having their court down there, which is the child support, everything's out there. I mean, it's all kind of people out there. That's and we see it in the morning sometime, I guess, when we're having our meetings. Anybody got any questions? Because some people say all the runs, but Mr. Booth.
Yeah, if you just cut the terrazzo very nicely and not just shovel it up and go, all right, just fill it in with some acrylic or something, but if you framed it out as a nice entranceway doorway, you wouldn't have to worry about matching 1977 terrazzo. So, you know, I know, you can build a house for $150,000, not just knock a wall out and put a door in. I mean, there's no pipe, you didn't show any pipes going through there they're gonna have to reroute. There's no, high voltage wiring. It's cinder block. Jimmy and I, on a bad day, you go out there and at least knock it out. You can pay someone, we'll do it for free, and you can pay someone $40 to just rebuild it and plug a door in it. I mean, that's just, I'm just.
Commissioner Kay?
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, that's okay.
Look, it's not gonna get any cheaper. Anything is going to go up. And we have, another alternative funding now. My motion is that we move forward with this project. It's not gonna get any cheaper. If y'all price bill of materials.
I'd like to go around with my camera and come back in about 10 minutes and show you how many places don't match 1970s terrazzo floor.
If it's the board's preference that we do not include the terrazzo floor, then we'll come back with a revised bid.
I mean, you could put,
Well, I don't know if you need to revise, it's up to that amount, so if you change it and it goes down lower than that, I don't think you
outside of the,
Yeah.
you want to change it.
My motion would be to include the what is it, 37, I got my.
$37,028.
Whatever that is. That's my motion.
Well, I'll second the discussion. Second the discussion.
You got a motion in a second.
I'm not too sure. I think things are gonna level off soon. It's not gonna be where it was, but price of lumber's gone down, things are going down, concrete's going down. We probably bid this right at the height. I mean, concrete and steel is what we're talking about.
So this second bid was, I believe, put out October 14th.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's at the top of the market. So, okay, but these floors were amazing in 1972, but I try to look at it, how would a contractor who's putting their own money into it, and I try to look at counting money as my own money, is going through there. I see the wisdom of putting the door in, but to Mr. Booth's point, we're knocking out a wall with no electrical, no plumbing, no anything, and it's costing $150,000 right now.
There is electrical, there is plumbing within the wall.
Okay, that was never said.
Well,
Okay, regardless, if we could talk about the motion to include some of your ARP money in there, I'm all in.
Well, or at least look at it to see. But here's, I guess my question would be, or comment would be, we only had two bidders. I don't know that the bid people gonna go down any lower than what he got. If those are the only two bidders and one was disqualified, those would be probably the people who bid. I guess you can change the specs a little bit, but you still got the same two bidders that's gonna come in. I guess these people have a whole lot of work, and $100,000 project is probably not, on their scale in terms of what they can do. So, but go ahead, you want to do it now? Do the ARP? I go to the manager.
I think we can certainly, I think the attorneys would have to vet the project to make sure it meets the Treasury guidelines, the North Carolina general statutes.
And we're in the census tract. So always remember, this is a census tract. This is one of the census tracts. And in terms of that, the COVID, I think we can make that, I think it's, in terms of that, Commissioner Booth.
yeah, again, I'll have the pictures, I guess, by the next meeting, because there's so many that I can think of right now. Terrazzo's not even really safe when it rains, folks. We're out there all the time telling people, watch out, we have yellow stickers all over the place, say, slippery, slippery, slippery. Why would we put buffed stone with trimmed in steel out there for the public to walk and slip in sewers? I guarantee it's not Number one on OSHA's, and I don't know what it is, but I guarantee you OSHA's anti-slip floor right now is not Terrazzo. So why would we go back and try to build something in 1970 specs that no one even cares? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Someone says, I'm not going to the rich, oh, I'm not going in there. They got brand new slate floors. I'm not going in there. Where's the Terrazzo floors from 52 years ago? You know, so I'm just, that's the whole thing. Knocking out aesthetics. Yeah.
But
Yeah, we've got a 300-year-old courthouse that we can't get plumbing in.
So we got a motion on the floor to move forward with the project by increasing the not to exceed amount of $37,028 with the proviso that if it could be used out of the ARP funds, that it would be able to do that because of the COVID. Put out at the minutes, the COVID, in terms of moving people away from each other within 6 feet, and that it's in the census tract.
I didn't catch all that with Jeanette's motion.
Yeah, it was all in that motion.
My second still holds.
That was all in that motion. All of those in favor?
Voting in favor, Commissioners Council, Keith, Adams, and Stewart. Voting in opposition, Commissioner Booth. The motion passes.
Here, bring us our pictures. Thank you. That takes us to the renovation from the request from the clerk's Superior Court, which is all that money comes out of the judicial court fees fund. So, but Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. So this is a request from the Clerk of Superior Court, and I'm going to ask Mr. Jackson to present this item.
And thank you, the registered deeds. Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry I didn't even recognize our registered deeds. Thank you for being here. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. In the past, staff has been directed to bring renovation requests for the Judge Maurice E. Grassman Courthouse to the Board of Commissioners agenda session for review and consensus. And that's what brings us here today for this particular item. The Clerk of Court has seen an increased demand for services in the Estates Division and is asking to relocate a conference room to serve more than one customer at a time. You'll find some diagrams in your packets regarding the proposed changes. The project involves removing a wall, relocating a door, and purchasing 2 workstations and associated seating. The anticipated cost for renovations and furnishings are $12,300. Funds are available in the court facilities budget and can be directed to this project. Staff is seeking consensus from the board to proceed with the project.
Mr. Booth's got that much in his back pocket. Commissioner Booth.
To get it out on the floor, I move we approve this. Speaking of something that hasn't probably been upgraded since the 70s when Dan McMillan designed it, it's the estate's office. So if they're asking for it, it's long overdue.
Yeah, she's cutting out part of her comments.
Yeah.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Stewart. All of those in favor?
Unanimous.
All right. Thank you so very much. Yes, I got you. Request from PwC to amend the Franklin Street parking garage. Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. First of all, I just want to let the board know that we have Miss Elena Ball with us, who is the CEO
Oh, I
of
didn't
the
see her back
Public
there.
Works
She's
Commission.
hiding in the back there. Welcome.
She's here. We received a request that was sent to Mr. Moorfield and myself about an amendment to the parking agreement. And so I'm going to let Mr. Moorfield provide some background on the request from the Public Works Commission.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. 3 of you that are seated were not here when this was done, so I'll give you a little history on it. The county entered into this interlocal agreement with the city and PwC for the county to contribute to the $50 tax increase in the downtown district to the city for repayment of the debt on the parking deck. That was back in 2010. The reason that the bulk water purchase agreement was tacked onto that, made part of that was, we were in a real bind at that time to get a water agreement together because of the USDA's requirement for a referendum in the Grays Creek Water District, which went forward, and it was, we were just under the gun to get that stuff done. And we simply couldn't get a water agreement at that time from PwC. So we put that out there, and we ended up with the agreement by which PwC agreed to sell water. There's the bulk water sale provisions in that agreement. And that's good through June 30th, 2030. So we actually have a bulk water purchase agreement in place with PwC at least until that time, until 2030 right now. And that's why it was done that way. In 2000, it was one bad thing about that agreement was it had a very indefinite repayment term, and we tried to get that firmed up, but the city wouldn't do it. Until 2018, when they wanted to carve out the baseball stadium. And so one of the concessions made for us doing that was they ended the indefinite repayment term to a period ending December 31st, 2030. It really didn't cost us anything because we're committed, they still committed to the tax payment from either one place or the other, the baseball field or the stadium, either the stadium or the parking deck. PwC sent this request over, and while this worked back in 2010, at that time, PwC wanted parking spaces in the parking deck. The city wanted the parking deck, and we just wanted water, and they both wanted our money, so that's how it came together. Now, PwC and the city have already approved this agreement, and it basically gives the city's given PwC the right to assign additional parking spaces and the right to assign its interest in those parking spaces to a third party, and I think that's in the event PwC sells the Robert C. Williams building. And they've extended it out to June 30th, 2053. And I've told PwC's attorney this, it's my opinion that that deal is done, whether we sign this or not, but PwC insists that we need to sign this. And my recommendation is the board, you certainly can do it, but to me it's sort of strange that we would now be signing off for an extension to 2053 for something that for us ends December 31st, 2030. So, you know, my suggestion would be to request PwC to extend our bulk water purchase agreement to that same term, and then that would make it a meaningful reason for the county to sign off on this. So that's my recommendation.
So I guess I would ask you, you said PwC and the city has already approved it.
Yes, sir.
And they didn't approve it to 2053.
Yes, sir.
They did?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, if possible, could Ms. Lena Ball come forward? I think she may have a response to the extension to 2053. There is a time constraint. Do you mind if?
I do not.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak. So I think all of the facts that have been presented are absolutely spot on, with one exception. The extension to 2053 is about the parking rights, right? And so the approval that has been obtained by my commission and the city council is exclusively about the parking rights. And if I can just be candid, y'all know me, I shoot straight, we're trying to sell the building, okay? We have not had operations in it. The utility, this is surplus property. The utility is not a tax-paying entity. It's a prime location. So that was one of the first things I saw when I came in. We should not be in this business. We should turn this over to for-profit entities and allow them to develop prime real estate, which benefits the net position of the utility, which in fact will positively impact the pilot, the transfer to the city, and will present additional tax revenue to the region. So all in, it's a win-win-win. We will not be able to sell this building without being able to assign and extend these parking rights. And so we are in a process, and we are using an upset bid process. And so if at this time we open up the water side of the agreement, it will likely break this deal down. So we are absolutely happy to entertain not only a bulk water agreement for Grace Creek or other parts of the community. In fact, have had some discussions with the county on this and are, I believe, working in very much good faith and or willing to open this up to extend this and look at this. I have not taken this forward to my commission. So respectfully would ask that the commissioners consider the motion at hand. This is an agreement that was entered into by all three parties, and in fact, the First Amendment that Mr. Moorfield represented was in 2018, and all three parties did have to sign. And so the purchaser, potential successful purchaser of the building, in order to have really free and clear assignment of parking rights, would want all parties to this agreement to have affirmed that the extension of assignment is valid. This does not cost the county any funds.
Commissioner Keith.
Ms. Ball, what is the significance of 2053 for the sale part?
Yeah, it is actually tied to, the city recommended because it's tied to their financing schedule within their bond covenants, and so that's exactly what it's tied to.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your candidness. You have, I think you, because you're a straight shooter, you've earned the trust of a lot of people in the community. So, Mr. Chair, if there's no other discussion on this, I'd like to make a motion we accept the proposed agreement.
But not the extension part. The 2053 part.
The
That's
20
what she did.
What?
Less than the 2053.
Yeah, no, I'm saying go up to 2053.
And just
No.
so I can
Not the
maybe
water
have,
extension.
Not the water.
Not water.
Oh, not
Just-
water,
yeah,
not
that's-
water extension.
Yeah, just on
The Franklin Street parking garage are review.
If I should add on to my motion, with you agreeing to come to the table for us in the future with positive intent.
we're there now
She's working
already.
on it. She's
We're-
working on
But I understand, and I don't
She
know
has
the
a board.
history, but
She has a
we're
board.
not in that.
You see the history. of what
Commissioner
we-
Lucas.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would second Mr. Keefe's motion to amend the Franklin Street parking garage agreement to extend to 2053.
And I'll put on the table that I actually have business inside that building, my law firm is in there, but it does not endure any monies to me or anything like that, so it's not a conflict, but I will put that on the table. All those in favor?
That is unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Ball.
I have a question, point of order. Are we still doing it if it's unanimous, it goes by default, or do we have to say it go on to the consent agenda at the next board meeting?
On the, each memorandum
Yeah.
has a request that it go to the consent agenda unless you tell us differently or
Okay.
unless it's not
I want to
unanimous.
have it mixed in.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That takes us to the contract for the volunteer fire department radio purchase.
Yes, sir.
Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. Mr. Jackson has worked with Chief Freddie Johnson on this issue, and I'm going to ask Tracy to provide some of the details.
And I would like to recognize Chief Johnson, who's with us.
Yep, Freddie does.
And there are questions, if you have questions later, I'm sure. he'll
Give it to
be a
him,
resource.
Mike.
No, we'll answer what we can. If we can't, we'll ask Chief Johnson. Stone Point Fire Department has offered to lease, purchase, and distribute replacement portable radios for all fire departments in Cumberland County. The reason for the replacement is twofold. First, many radios across the fire service are outdated and in need of replacement. Second, the Federal Communications Commission is making changes to the radio frequency spectrum that require public safety agencies to upgrade their communications technology prior to 2025. As a side note, Stony Point purchased and distributed radios for fire stations and apparatus using fire tax district tax funds in FY21. It is important to note that approving the funding that's being requested today will allow the fire service to complete their radio upgrades well ahead of the 2025 deadline and provide firefighters with state-of-the-art radio communications. Attached is a proposed contract between the county and Stony Point where the county will provide fire tax funds to cover the cost of radios over time. Stony Point plans to enter into a lease purchase agreement with the vendor to pay for the radios and associated accessories. The staff was provided updated pricing late Friday and asked to revise the proposed contract. The old price was $2,769,982. The new price is $3,085,746.
3,085.
$3,085,746.
Okay.
Stony Point Fire Department plans to finance of this new amount, $2,850,243 after making a $500,000 down payment this year.
Say that again. So we got the 3,085,746. And the next amount is the,
So the next thing is that they would like to make a $500,000 down payment this year dropping that amount that needs to be financed to $2,850,243. Okay? Now, that means that there need to be annual payments of $517,149 for fiscal years 23 through 27. That's 5 years, okay? In order to complete the lease purchase.
So, okay, so that kind of, I don't, the only reason I just asked that, because at the 2.7, the annual installment was 553. When do we pay the 500 back that they do for the down payment, I guess?
So it would come out of this year's fire tax funds.
Okay,
Yes.
and so they go ahead and get, okay.
So they can go ahead and start this process. Now, the reason for that price increase, that change in the price, there was a price increase on radio accessories such as shoulder straps, speaker microphones. There were 2 new radios that were needed for our fire department that added new apparatus. And then all of the radios were upgraded, the proposed radios to be purchased, were upgraded to a more durable model. These are firefighting rated, not just for administrative use. So the fire departments actually had kind of the split where they had some radios that were used for fire suppression, and others that were just for use outside of buildings, outside of fires, and then said for administrative use. So what they're proposing is purchase more rugged radios that are just strictly all firefighting. Okay. And those are more expensive. Funding is available in FY22 from the fire tax district funds for the proposed down payment to the vendor and the payments in the future years. And the members of the Chiefs Association have agreed to allow Stony Point Fire Department to enter into this lease purchase on their behalf, and they have signed a document to that effect. Staff recommends approval and requests this item be moved forward to the November 15th Board of Commissioners meeting as a consent agenda item.
Commissioner Booth.
Thank you, Tracy. That was a great summary of it. Captain Johnson and Chief Johnson and his crowd have been working on this, and I think they've done everything but threaten to withhold fire coverage equipment to the banks if they don't really have to do this because of how much the need is. And so they've been keeping us updated the whole time, and this is the last presentation. And I think that we all kind of looked at each other and said it makes too much sense. I don't remember us even having any questions at the last presentation, so I would move that we...
Can I ask one more?
Yes, sir.
Just because I have a question. And I don't have a question as to this. But I always believe that when you buy things in bulk, it's a whole lot better. So did we actually talk to Spring Lakes, well, they ain't got no money, but Stanford and some of these cities who have fire departments as to whether, they would pay for whatever they are, but they can't buy this stuff by themselves. And is it, did we talk to them about possibly being a partner to this?
So if you're referring to municipalities, if I understand the question correctly.
Yes, besides the city of Fayetteville, they're big, but the rest of them are so small.
Our approach to this was because we were using county fire tax district funds, and these were going to county fire departments, the purchase was going to be made just solely in that respect.
Well, I understand, we wouldn't pay for it, but if we can order a number of them and tell them you need 5, this is how much your 5 would cost, and they're willing to pay that, because otherwise we got a dysfunctional system, do we not? I mean, I just want to know.
Here's the other thing, and Chief
And Chief might be able to answer, I don't know.
He may be able to help me more on the technology side, because not all of the municipalities use the same radio system that we do. So I don't know if we could go to them and say, hey, purchase these radios.
Just
they don't have
ask
to
them.
go on that system.
I'm not saying that we tell them they got to do, and Chief, Johnson can tell me. I'm just thinking it's a whole lot easier if everybody's, and everybody may not be on the same system. I guess that would be my first question, Chief.
Chief Johnson, can you come to the microphone?
And I excluded this city of Fayetteville because they can do all of their purchasing. I'm talking, those little small towns. I don't.
Well,
Spring Lake.
Yeah, Hope Mills and Spring Lake, I guess we don't.
So both the smaller municipalities are aware of this upgrade, and Spring Lake actually, because they take care of Manchester, those radios are included. And another thing that's important, there's a benefit right now, a savings that is good through November 30th. If we don't make that, it goes up by over 40,000.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking whether Hope Mills said, look, order me 5 while you're doing that, because you're getting such a great rate. This project, I don't have a problem with. That was just the only thing that I was talking about, is that, you know, if we were gonna buy them, and maybe if it slows down the process, because I'm not willing to go up 40,000, but, that was just my, so you got a motion on the floor?
Just motion to approve the volunteer fire department radio purchase as presented for the up to 3085746.00.
Plus all the others, the 500.
Right, according to the payment terms.
Second by Commissioner Council. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Chief. But I still think we have to ask. That takes us to Madam Manager, the amendment to the Fort Bragg Regional Land Use Advisory.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask Ross Howard to present the amendments to the Regional Land Use Advisory Commission, better known as RULAC.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
So this item we have before you is an update to the Regional Land Use Advisory Commission bylaws. For those of you that don't know, RULAC is our intermediary organization that serves and helps for planning and land use items that are affecting the base. So they serve as an organization that staff in Cumberland County works with in order to be able to coordinate better land use planning around the Fort Bragg area. So this item that you have before you is just an update of the bylaws. Essentially in 2005 was the last time these bylaws were updated. And incidentally, that was the year that actually Cumberland County and a majority of the organizations actually signed on to be a part of RULAC. So these bylaws have not been updated in now about 16 years. So essentially what's happening, Commissioners, is the organization in these 16 years have essentially outgrown their bylaws. We've had a number of different changes organizationally that have taken place, and so we've been working on this project probably since, I'd say, April or May of this year. And then it was adopted or approved by the Commission in August to move forward for at least 2/3 of votes of the constituent members that are a part of RULAC for approval. So really some of the highlights, just updating some of the general statute references, is updating how boards and committees that are in the RULAC can function, and really expanding upon the officer type of membership and operation. So that's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll try to be able to answer what I can.
Anyone have any questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
That's my
Commissioner, Council. Okay, to approve the bylaw amendments of the Fort Bragg Regional Land Use Advisory Commission. I get a second. All of those in favor?
unanimous.
That takes us, thank you. To the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Park Capital Project.
Yes, sir. This is an item that has been developed both with the assistance of the county attorney as well as the county finance director. So Vicki is going to present this item, and if the county attorney may provide some assistance as well.
Vicki can handle it.
Thank you for that vote of confidence. Rick played a tremendous role in this. So, as a reminder, the Board of Commissioners previously approved the $2.5 million contribution to support construction of a capital project being undertaken by the nonprofit corporation Fayetteville Cumberland County Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Committee. And so in support of that contribution, the county attorney and I developed the budget ordinance, the capital budget ordinance which was attached to the agenda. And it is allowed for general statutes. And we developed it because this is a unique situation. So previously, the county has allocated funds to nonprofit corporations for services. We've not previously allocated funds to build capital or real for construction of real property. And so we set it up to establish some basic parameters, and going forward, this type of ordinance could be used in the future for allocating capital funding contributions to other nonprofits. So the capital project budget ordinance, I'll kind of go through it just section by section, just to review what each section states. So sections 1, 2, and 3 combined, they provide a description of what the project being undertaken is, and that the funding is provided from the capital investment fund, and it shows a balanced budget. A summary of section 4, it basically states that a contract has to be approved between the nonprofit and the board before any funds are paid out. Section 5, it summarizes that the nonprofit corporation is subject to the same statutory bid laws, just like the county and other local governments are subject to. And Section 6 basically just covers that any change, increase or decrease to the $2.5 million amount that the board has already approved, any change to that must be approved by the Board of Commissioners. And then Section 7 is just standard language about the filing of the ordinance. Are there any questions?
Mr. Commissioner Keith.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is this being a template for future, that you're gonna use this exact thing in the future.
For capital.
The only thing that concerns me about this in the future is when you're giving money for capital, so many times nonprofits or whatever are using that money to try to get to another level of funding so they can begin the project. And we're all aware that sometimes that doesn't happen. So was there any consideration, and I'm thinking specifically like the Civil War Museum when it came up, is there any specific deadline or timing that we should be putting in here that says I know you discussed it in here, but we don't want somebody to say, hey, we got this great project and the county gives them a bunch of money and they spend all the money on marketing and nothing ever happens. Because we still are stewards of taxpayer money. So how do we protect
the county? So, and Rick, if you can, I'd say that would be spelled out in the contract.
It is actually, it says the contract shall identify the project budget and source of funds for completion of the project, the design, maintenance and other matters deemed necessary approved by the board. So the contract would have to show, I mean, you did have an obligation of the contract to show that they've got the full funding. We would not want to, we can't give them $2.5 million for them to try to get more funding. We don't have the authority to do that. And as far as this being a template for another project like this, in the 28 years I've been doing this sort of stuff, never done this. So, I mean, there's never been contracting with a nonprofit to do a construction project. So
How is that different than Civil War Museum?
It's not. I mean, this is what would have happened if the Civil War Museum had gone forward. I think that was actually a state project. That's actually what
But regardless, it's taxpayer money going to a nonprofit. And if we were to give, and just for clarity, I am not talking about specifically Martin Luther King right now at the park. I am talking about generally. But if we were to give money to a nonprofit with the intent of a capital project, and they spent the money, and the nonprofit dissolved, we'll never ever be able to recover our money.
Well, we could have gone through all those details, but actually this language covers, I think covers every concern you have. It said it'll not only identify the budget and source of funds for the completion of the project, design, scope of work, schedule completion, procedure for the disbursement of funds. I mean, I've talked with some of the representatives from the MLK committee, and they understand that it might be that we would be the vendor as this thing. I mean, there may not be a pass-through through the MLK, committee.
But let me ask you, is your intention that if this particular project is still not built in 10 years, that the county is obligated into perpetuity?
That would be up to the board. The board just voted to do this, and we did a project ordinance that would put the parameters on how we could do it, but there is no time limit on it at this point.
Well, there have to be a time limit. And I guess my question would be, here's my question. What if a nonprofit's renting something for $1 a year from somebody, and they don't own the land? And we do that, and it endures to whoever the landowner is, and not necessarily to the nonprofit.
And this is, in that situation, the committee does not own the land, it's the city owns the land. And this is
I'm not just talking about them in general, I'm just talking about anybody.
But you're right, anybody that came on doing that, you're right, we would have to put these kind of, I think both commissioners, Keith and Adams, listened to enough of that stuff. We can't give money to nonprofits. We can contract with them to do something we can do, and I think we can do this, and I think we can contract with them, and we will make sure that the contract that we have in place, which you'll have to approve, has the safeguards in it to make sure that what you're concerned about, which is it has happened not here, but in the past other places, that we wouldn't give them money and then it just not get spent like it's supposed to. That the contract will prevent that from happening.
So I guess that when they presented, I don't know how soon they said they were going to do that building, is to ask them what is their timetable, because I do think that there needs to be some kind of review after 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. And money can't just, sit there and be locked up, because basically we're going to lock up this for whatever period of time that it does. So
I've looked at all the documentation they provided me about this project. It's a long way from construction to missing. There is no design. The design they brought in is a conceptual design. They didn't hire the architect. It's not a North Carolina license. I mean, so there's all kinds of issues like that. And I've discussed this at length with Dr. Lacey, and he understands that, and he agrees. He knows about this. And he says, but he says they are moving forward. So that's where. And the other aspect of this is, I think their anticipation was the remainder of their funds would come in the state budget, and I think it's just as likely this year that we're not going to get a state budget as it has been for the last 2 years. It's already November. So I'm just telling you that's another issue.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like, what we put in the CIP at 7.5. I mean, at some point, something it has to resolve itself so we can move on to, using those funds for the benefit of the county.
May I suggest we add the section 7 in between it makes section 7A, that at the end of the fiscal year, if no contract's been entered, the board will review the project and get a status on or something like that, and to make decisions. I mean, just that.
Well, we know it's not going to be at the end of the year, so that makes no sense to, I mean, they're not going to, I mean, at least, if they got to give them some time. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm at least realistic that you said this is a conceptual standpoint, so just to keep bringing it back, I mean, either you put down 5 years and it's not done, it comes back to the county, 3 years, we review it, or something, but not in a year. I mean, they're going to come back in a year and say, hey, this is where we are. So I think you get them through the budget season, a couple of budget seasons, you never know what they do. If you do 5 or 3, if you do 3, you can come back and review it. And it's out there. It's dedicated for that, can't be used. And so, I would say a 3-year look back. I look at
3-year review.
Yeah, we'll make that, add that.
Well, that's if the board.
If the board votes that, we'll add that to the project ordinance, with the boards.
And if I can ask clear, since we're talking about a general statement here, I'm gonna take us back to the Civil War Museum, where we signed a resolution. And this to me kind of takes the place of a resolution in the sense that you're putting out your parameters. So based upon that, if from 3 years from the time, let me back up, until the board rescinds that resolution, it's still in place. But this would say, if we sign that, in 3 years, it sunsets unless the board acts on it again.
Well, the resolution that we did, it had all kind of parameters down there. I think it killed itself and was dead because they didn't do any of those things on that resolution.
That resolution actually had a termination.
And it had a sunset too.
I think December of last year.
Okay, sure.
But this is better though.
Do we have no obligation?
No, I don't think so up under that resolution.
The resolution
Not
has
under the
expired.
resolution.
The resolution is
All
expired.
right, okay. I'm sorry, I went
No, that's fine.
down a rabbit hole on that one.
No,
I'm just trying to-
But I think it's good discussion, because at some point, this is the same thing we're gonna reach in those ARP funds. This is gonna be for services and not to outbuild and do all of those things, so it's gonna be a continuous conversation, so. But,
Is that the board's preference that we do a 3-year look back in it?
Get a 3-year review audit before December 1st,
25.
25.
Specifically for this one.
yeah, just for this one.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
because
will include that in the project ordinance as it goes forward to your meeting. If you both do it that way, we'll have it in, that'll be.
yeah, and send them a copy of it, because that was one thing that we heard was, thank you very much for your verbal and everything support, but that's why we haven't been able to do anything, is there hasn't been any money. So we set up this meeting for them to come get started. So now they've got the group, they've got at least the concept, if not the architectural plan. So they ought to have something more than just still be thanking us 4 years from now, or 3 years from now.
Motion by Commissioner Booth, seconded by Commissioner Keith. All those in favor?
Can I have the motion restated?
That's Commissioner Booth right there.
That is-
Adopt the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Park Capital Project Budget Ordinance Amendment with a 3-year look back on our 3 years.
3-year review date,
Three-year
status,
review.
yeah, status update, 3 years.
All those in favor?
Unanimous, thank you very much.
Does anybody need to take a break? Because, as you get a little bit older, sometimes we have to take one of those. I didn't say that. Amendment to the county purchasing policy, Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. The finance director is going to present that item.
So, as you know, staff recently participated in a training specific to the ARPA funds that was hosted by the UNC School of Government, and we learned of an easy-to-implement policy change that would allow flexibility within the Code of Federal Regulations specific to the micro-purchase threshold and architectural and engineering services. So the request today is for a policy change to allow that threshold for A&E services to be consistent with North Carolina state law, which will allow for an exemption in the A&E amounts that fall below $50,000. So basically, we would be matching federal law to North Carolina state law. And so what this will do is it saves time for our engineering staff who would not have to conduct an RFP process every time they are seeking A&E services on federally funded projects when the cost falls below $50,000. And I'll also add that this is one simple policy change that we're making to the purchasing policy today. We've learned of multiple things that need to be updated within our policies moving forward in order to properly execute the ARP funding and in contracting and procurement. And so we still need to vet those, and we'll be back at a later date for any of those updates that need to be made.
And I would tell you one of, because I text the manager and Rick yesterday for the whole board, because I asked about the hub participation because it wasn't in there. And this is just the first of, from what they adjustments that we need to make to our whole purchasing, and we may need to review our whole purchasing arrangement. Because even with some of those federal funds, those good requirements are in there. Commissioner Keith, I think, has a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second. Second by Commissioner Booth. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Consideration of request for qualifications.
Yes, sir. This is an item related to the Norcrest capital improvements that we discussed with the board several months ago. This is the next step in that process, and I'll ask Mr. Walker to provide the details.
Go right ahead, sir.
So with this RFQ, our selection process, we worked through that, and Friesen Nichols ended up being the preferred choice for engineering services for the Norcrest sanitary sewer system. The scope of work, looking at this going into to this fiscal year, would be the Wave 2 lift station pump repairs, the Falcon force main, additional testing and inspection, new electrical equipment for the service panel and generators inside the lift stations, this being affected by corrosion. And then also, we would address the system-wide inflow and infiltration and look to reduce that, which would reduce the cost that the county pays for treating the water within the Norcrest system. So if the board so chooses, we would request that we accept Friesen Nichols as the preferred choice for engineering services, and this item be placed on the Board of Commissioners agenda and the Norcrest Governing Board agenda as consent items. And, one addition, that you would grant us permission to enter into negotiations for more detailed scope of work, cost of services, and contract preparation to bring back before the Board of Commissioners at a future meeting.
I wouldn't think you need permission for that, but that's fine. You got a motion?
Motion to approve Friesen Nichols as the contract.
All right. Got a second by Commissioner Council?
Or did you say? I did not.
Okay. All those in favor?
Unanimous?
That's correct. That takes us to the DSS elevator modification. They're gonna walk up all them steps, Mr. Walker. What's the problem over there? They don't need that.
We're going to do employee fitness program.
Now, Commissioner Stewart over there, you can walk up those steps, can't you? Now, those steps are just, don't get you exercise, get your steps in. Go ahead, sorry, Madam Manager.
Mr. Walker's going to present this
Mr.
item
Walker.
as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So this is phase 2 in the final phase of the FY20 capital improvement project. This project was put out for bid September 8th, closed bid on September 28th, with Able Elevator having the lowest responsive and responsible bid of $709,000. Staff is recommending that we accept Able Elevator with the lowest responsive and responsible bid. We're also requesting that the board grant approval of a $75,000 contingency, with funding being available within the project budget, and that the board would delegate the authority to the county manager to approve change orders not to exceed $75,000 in aggregate amount.
Well, if it's a lot of, that's a lot of food. I guess I didn't understand the 75,000 contingency, if it was already available within the project, but that's fine, I think. Is there a motion, or anybody have any questions? And I think Commissioner Stewart sits on that board, so she probably understands the need for that.
If she makes the motion, I'll second.
And it's the motion to accept the selection of Able Elevators with the bid and grant the approval of a 75,000 contingency with funding being made in the proposed budget, and the delegated authority to the county manager to approve change orders not to exceed 75,000 aggregate amount. That motion was made by Commissioner Stewart, seconded by Commissioner Council. All of those in favor?
Unanimous?
Thank you. That takes us, I think Mr. Walker's still there, huh? The Crown Coliseum boiler burner repairs and retubing bid.
Yes, sir. These were actually two projects that the engineer felt like were better suited to be combined.
And so doing that, we save the county money and mobilization and demobilization costs, and just overall overhead for the project. These boilers are original to the construction of the Crown Coliseum, and so the industry standard usually is to replace them within 10 to 15 years. And so retubing these boilers would give us an additional somewhere between 7 to 10 years of useful life, and that would give us the additional fiscal flexibility to be able to plan a complete replacement as a future CIP project. So with this project, Valley Boilers had the lowest responsive and responsible bid, and we're requesting that the board accepts Valley's bid, and that once again grants us approval for a $15,000 contingency, with funding being available also within the project budget, and delegate once again the approval for change orders to the county manager not to exceed the $15,000 aggregate amount.
How come I couldn't buy the boilers from Valley and have Icon install them? That'd be cheap. But anyway, if we do the 15,000 contingency, it takes it up to that lowest bidder at 165. I mean, it's anybody have any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Council made the motion to accept the selection of the Valley Boilers with the lowest responsive and responsible bid, grant approval of a $15,000 contingency with the funding being available in the project budget, and delegate the authority to the county manager to approve change orders not to exceed $15,000 aggregate amount. Can I get a second? Been seconded by Commissioner Stewart. All of those in favor?
Unanimous.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you, Madam Manager. That takes us to the request of the town of Godwin to relinquish its jurisdiction to the county for minimum housing. I don't want to say release their jurisdiction. They might think I'm taking away their charge. Housing code enforcement. I think we've been through this before, Mr. Warfield.
Yes, so the last one was the town of Linden. Falcon has done it several, but this is the new process under Chapter 160D, by which the town, and the town's resolution is included in the package. The town does relinquish its jurisdiction to the county for the application and enforcement of the minimum housing code. And
how many more of these we got? How many towns have we done?
Eastover, Stedman, Falcon, Godwin, we've done all of them. Wade, I'm not sure what, Wade never did do it. We had some back and forth, Wade.
So it's just include everybody unless they opt out.
Well, they have to request it.
They have to request it.
They have to request it. I mean, it's a big thing for the relinquish of jurisdiction, but what it does is it makes us totally responsible for all aspects of it. And the planning folks don't have to know about another ordinance too, so that's good.
Anybody have any questions or comments? If not, if I can get a motion. Mr. Keith made the motion to accept the jurisdiction of the town of Godwin for the purpose of applying and enforcing the county's minimum housing code as set forth in Article 4, Chapter 4, Cumberland County Code by adopting the attached county resolution. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Stewart. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
All right. That takes us to, thank you, Ross. Takes us to the, and thank you, Mr. Morefield, Timekeeping System Project.
Yes, sir,
It's
Mr.
been a
Chairman.
while since Todd had been here to see us. Let's see what we got.
Yes.
Yes.
So we've asked Keith Todd, our Chief Information Services Director, to keep the board apprised of our major enterprise solutions. This is an internal one, not as much external, but it's going to have a significant impact on our efficiency. It's one we're excited about. Mr. Todd.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and again, I want to express that excitement as well because this is something that's been a long time coming. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you today and present to you a new enterprise timekeeping system for Cumberland County. At this time, a comprehensive RFP process has been completed, and it set forth some major goals for us, specific requirements to include the overall goal of streamlining, automating, and improving the timekeeping and payroll process. The chief goal is to automate time tracking and scheduling, electronically manage leave requests with time collection options such as a web portal, time collection, non-devices like a time clock on the wall, and also a mobile app to make it easy and provide mobility options for Cumberland County staff. Also, the chief goal was to have a paperless timekeeping system that would interface with the existing payroll system while also standardizing timekeeping across the county. In essence, is to get rid of this. This is our timesheets today that county staff all complete. These timesheets they're printed, they're signed, they're provided for approval to the supervisor, oftentimes many levels of supervision approvals, ultimately to the department head. They're reviewed and validated by each department administrator to ensure that the time is accurate. It also is keyed into Munis, and then they're hand delivered. Almost over 2,000 timesheets are either hand delivered or faxed over to finance for timesheet payroll processing from there. In addition to the timesheets, our leave requests are also follow a very similar manual process as the timesheets do. The leave requests are printed, they're filled out, they're provided for approval, confirmation of available time, and then also compared to each departmental calendars, just to make sure that there's not a scheduling conflict. They're entered into Munis, they're hand delivered to payroll along with the timesheets, and they're processed by payroll from there. As you can see, these are very manual processes, requiring a lot of oversight, overhead, and also time from staff. The new process will provide for automation, begin with employees being able to input time through the various collection points, either again the web portal, a time clock on the wall, or even a mobile app to input their time, and also for approvals. It would then follow a workflow for approvals and go into a single portal for management to view available time, to schedule staff, ensure that staff have available time, there's no scheduling conflicts, all in one location, while also seamlessly integrating that with our payroll system that we have in production today. So in ITS budget in $220,000 in FY21 and reappropriated funds into FY22 to effectively complete the RFP process. With the RFP process not complete, a bid award will be presented to the Board of Commissioners at the upcoming next board meeting, and we estimate roughly having a project timeline of 12 months. This is a very extensive project. It's impacting every single county employee, requiring a lot of configuration. So we're anticipating around a 12-month project to completion. So I'm glad to entertain and answer any questions you may have around the enterprise timekeeping system.
Sir, real quick. Can't believe we've gone this long without it. How many, have you done an actuary, how much FTE we lost doing this?
No, sir.
It's got to be in the,
You mean that we might lose?
no, that the employees that we had figuring out time cards and sending them to somebody else and tracking them down as opposed to an automated system.
Not FTE, but how much time we lost doing all of that.
No.
Yeah, not the FTE.
What is
They
gonna
take
be-
FTE as a full-time equivalent. He's talking about how much work that we did and it cost us in lost productivity.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Yeah. We don't have an actual study on that. We have read case studies where similar counties have implemented similar systems. The payroll process would go typically from a four-day to 2 to 4 hour. So we can't speak specifically to our organization, but we got to say it's going to be very similar results that we can anticipate.
I went to this about 3 years ago in my business, and it took away a lot of error and put in a lot of efficiency.
So if you think about it, over the last couple of years, really since 2015, we've replaced the financial system with Munis. We've replaced the tax system with Variant. We've established InterGov, an electronic system, and this is the next phase. So there have been some major enterprise projects over the last 6 years. And so,
Can I ask a question, Madam Manager?
yes, sir.
And I see it says, to bring this back, we budgeted 220, so we would have, and you want to move it to FY 2022. Why wouldn't we just do that today? I mean, I don't understand why we need to wait to bring it back to do that. I mean, finance-wise, I mean, it doesn't make any, it just doesn't make sense to me to wait another month just to do that, because that's just,
Well, we were going to bring the bid, so the bid will not come from Mr. Todd.
Right, that's
It will
right.
come from finance.
Right.
It'll be on your consent agenda Monday evening to
Yeah.
approve the bid.
this, that Monday, so,
Yes, sir.
yeah. But
We
we still have to
today,
do move the 220 to FY '22 at some point.
I think we've already done
money's already been
it. The money's already been reappropriated.
Oh, it's already been done?
It's already been done.
Okay, that's
The
good.
money's been
Okay.
reappropriated.
Oh, yeah, they reappropriate, okay.
Yes, sir.
I got you.
Do we already know what the bid is?
I'm sorry.
The bid amount
The bid amount is, I want to say $153,000.
was under the amount budgeted.
I ain't gonna say that to Mr. Walker over there, but anyway. It came under the bids. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, very good. That takes us, Madam Manager, to the ARP update.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I would like to give a brief update. As you know, several staff members, including the 3 attorneys in the county attorney's office, participated in 6 at least half-day sessions with the School of Government regarding the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so it was a bit overwhelming, and the recurring theme along the way was consult with your county attorney. So the U.S. Treasury will not vet any projects. They're expecting you to go through that process. And folks at the School of Government, the County Commissioners Association, are all stressing that you need to utilize your county attorneys to vet that process. And so Mr. Moorfield and the 2 assistant county attorneys are in the process of taking the projects that have so far been identified the board and doing a matrix that we agreed on, looking about how it fits with the U.S. Treasury guidelines, the North Carolina general statutes, uniform procurement guidelines, and coming back with, and we'll present this back to the ARP committee about how we can move forward with those projects and what changes, if any, need to be made. And so we hope to bring that back to the ARP committee within the next couple of weeks, that type of information based upon the training.
Anybody have any questions? So I have one question, though.
Yes,
and
sir.
I guess is for the chairman of the ARP committee, which would be Mr. Keith and the manager. With the infrastructure bill that just passed, some of the things that we identified in the ARP funds may need to be done with that infrastructure fund, the bill that came down, especially some of that water, whether we're doing the transportation or whatever. But and I know it just passed, so nobody has any idea, but I think we need to kind of look to see if any of those projects might be able to be moved over and free up those ARP funds for some other things. So
Yeah, if
that's
things
the
would
guidance.
stop changing, it would make it a little bit easier, because if the state budget is passed sometime soon in the future, that would be another consideration about the state ARP funds to be passed down. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to completely move forward. If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to, still under the American Rescue Plan, can you hand this out to the board members? I've had several conversations at our ARP committee meetings about pandemic pay. And one of the things we were waiting on was some specific guidance about premium pay. And so today I come asking for your consent to move forward with pandemic pay. Many counties have done this. I will tell you that most of them, if not all of them, have used CARES funding. And today we have about $2.4 million of remaining freed up CARES funding. And most counties have recognized all employees, but especially those that have worked very directly with the vaccination clinics. So today before you, I have a proposal that I have worked with the finance staff, budget staff, HR, and payroll. And so the first tier would be labeled high-risk exposure. Those that participated in COVID testing as well as vaccination clinics. That would be all of the public health staff. It would include emergency management, fire marshal, and a few IT staff that provided significant support at the vaccination clinics and the testing sites, as well as all of the custodial staff throughout county facilities. Many of you know that we had several times when we had employees test positive. Custodians actually came in early in the mornings to clean and sanitize offices, courtrooms, and county facilities. So they too were in that high-risk category. And so the proposal today is for Tier 1 to provide a one-time payment of $3,000 to all of those employees in this high-risk category. This has been based upon a premium pay calculation. Mrs. Evans actually calculated the hours that were involved with testing and vaccination clinics and used the premium. Did you want to ask?
I just have one question. Because I'm looking way down here that says July 1, 2021. And those folk who did the vaccination clinic that you're talking about and all of that from way back when. So anybody July 21 gets the same amount of money, whether they worked in that or not? Or how are you going to do it? Because this says employed by 2021.
Yes, sir.
But they worked way back, so.
Yes, sir. So the time period that we're looking at to provide this pandemic pay was calculated based on that premium pay calculation, even though we're not using ARP funds, because the actual testing sites started mid-June of 2020 and have run through June of 2021. And so anywhere along the way, whatever date you pick, you may eliminate someone. And so those that are still employed, that's why those that are still employed by July 1, 2021, you have to be employed by that time period. Because as you'll remember, Commissioner Adams, even though this kind of cuts off, the Public Health Department is still vaccinating individuals.
So I guess my question would be, to take out the by, you must have been employed up through 2021. So everybody prior to, you see, if you say by 2021, then I'm expecting some money if I got hired in March of 2021 or whatever.
And you would be included in there, because it would be very complicated to prorate it. And I think the board's desire has been for us to get this out there to employees quickly. And the goal is to pay this with the pay period where employees get paid Wednesday, November the 24th. And so anyone that has been here at least by July 21st, 2021 will be included in the payment.
And so I guess mine would have been, take it back to when it started up until when we finished out there at the Crown, a date, and then it just makes it, I know it does complicate things, but.
Well, to your point, we could make it June 30th because we had clinics, so I'm happy to change that to June 30th.
I just have those folk who are in the rain and all of that, and I come here in July or whatever,
Yes,
and
sir.
I get the same amount that those folks stood out there in the rain and in the whatever way back when. So I'll go to Commissioner Booth. He's written something down.
That's, because I had the same concerns. Is like, this thing came and hit, and nobody even knew what it was when it first came here. So the reaction of the folks who've been here since March 2019 or whatever it was, things started getting closed and shut down and restricted, and everybody that looked like a bank robber or something, welcoming banks, people that didn't have masks on, weren't, and everything. And so those folks, if it's a different category, that they have a 2.4 or 2.5 or something, because if somebody has come on now since July, we were actually since about April or May on a good bubble, and then everything started kind of dropping out again, and now we're, in a very short amount of time, we're back up on the good side again. Now they've got two companies that have a one-time take a pill and you're done thing, and, so I think we've rounded the corner, or whatever it was that Mr. Keith said earlier, and my thing would have moved folks like law enforcement, detention officers, social services people that are up in each other's face, taking sick kids and parents' places, child support fraternity. You can't get any closer than sticking a needle in someone's arm or doing a swab out of their mouth. I mean, that's exactly what the testing people would do, is taking a swab out of your nose, and if you're doing paternity testing, you're taking a swab out of someone's mouth, for them to be in tier 2. I think those folks are in, I think those folks are in like the high risk area too. So I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just trying to say that July of this year didn't face nearly as much exposure as July of 2019 all the way down.
Let me do this. I think this might be, so we don't go through all that, is let her explain why she put them where they are, and then maybe that'll give us some idea as opposed to start moving stuff.
Could you tell us how many people are involved in tier 1 and tier 2 when you get those numbers?
I do not have all those numbers because we're still,
Right.
I think I had some communication with the board last week about this, and so we are working on identifying the categories. So in tier 1, I can probably tell you there are probably about 320 people in tier 1.
And I think Commissioner Stewart had a question.
Did we already get one question, some money for?
No, ma'am. These are the full-time employees. The poll workers received some special ARP money, and the Board of Elections
Appointees.
But the actual county employees have not received anything.
Okay.
Is there any compensation for the Crown Coliseum employees? Because they were out there too.
So they're not our employees. They're not on our payroll. Those that are
But this is
included.
CARES Act money though, it's not, if you do it with CARES Act money.
But they probably got structured venue money though for Spectrum.
That's a private enterprise.
Oh, well. I don't know.
I think government.
Let's go ahead.
Give money out of that.
Venue money. Okay, good.
So the categories, the tiers that are set up are that high-risk exposure. And that the belief is that those putting shots in arms and standing at the vehicles are at a high-risk exposure. But we do have some employees included in tier 2 that had an exposure risk because of some direct contact. Those employees would receive $2,000, and those are the sworn LEOs and detention officers. The library, as you may remember, conducted the virtual learning centers. Solid waste had continual contact in portions of social services, transportation section, social workers that had direct client contact, especially transporting children, cottage parents. We had risk management that actually took temperatures in this building, animal services, enforcement officers out in the field, and still providing adoption services and coming in, Board of Elections, and then we had folks out in the field, building inspectors, code enforcement, and rehab specialists. And so the final tier 3, is $1,000 before taxes and retirement. And it's anyone that has not been identified in tier 1 and tier 2.
How many people in tier 2?
Probably in tier 2, people and not positions, because we have a lot of unfilled positions. Right now, out of about 2,100, we have about 540 unfilled positions. So I'm talking people and not positions, which means it will cost us less money. I'm thinking there's probably about 400 in tier 2, or maybe less, somewhere along in there, maybe not even that much, somewhere between 300 and 400. The most significant number, I believe, will fall in tier 3. And the rationale for providing Tier 3 is that in any department, we had exposures of employees where they had to, either they were actually out because they tested positive or they had to quarantine. That means other employees were working double duty to continue serving citizens during the pandemic. And so I feel like there should be some payment for everyone, but at a different level. And that's why I have brought this for your consideration today.
And just so I can get this broad thing in there, how many people do you think would fall into that other category?
So if there's 300 in Tier 1, or roughly 300 in Tier 2, probably about 800 to 900, I believe. We're still working on putting people in the right classification to get at the payroll so they can start testing.
Mr. Chair, if I can make one comment. I applaud the initiative.
Yes, sir.
I really do.
Yes, sir.
We're looking at about $2.5 million based on your numbers.
Yes, sir.
And how much of CARES Act money do we have?
We have about 2.4 available.
That'd be good, man. Let me just back into that.
Well, we didn't want to spend too much money.
But we don't get, but, Amy, if we don't do this, I know that this is a live thing, but I'm gonna tell you right now, and I'll put it on camera. It's that whole joke about if you're giving people $100, there are gonna be people who wonder why they didn't get two.
Yes, sir.
And you will have people that will be making complaints that they believe that in their instance, they deserve more money. So I know that we are trying to be fair and we are trying to do this, but this might be one of those things where the prevention is worse, or the whatever is worse than the cure. And because it will cause, where's Dr. Wade? He's gonna get this.
But I would tell you, Jimmy, and I think that if you look, and they're looking across the state at other places, that our county doesn't really care about us. Everybody got some, I know there will be some people who complain that I didn't get as much. But I understand that, but I think though that doing nothing is a much bigger problem. Yeah, I know that. And so we just need to, it's just like we did with the $15 now, you just have to bite the bullet, take those, they're gonna come, but this shows those folk that, we understood where the pandemic was, and I think this county did some things for them. So I do understand.
What tier?
I'm Tier 1A. I'm at the top somewhere. I was here sweating then, but anyway.
So, if I may respond to Commissioner Keith, the reason that everything is not finalized is because I've agonized about this, and I'm sure you are probably not surprised that I have agonized about this. There are some counties that have only recognized public health and those that work the vaccination clinics. And during this time period, just as Mr. Booth said, from June of 20 through June of 21, there are employees that had direct contact and a risk exposure. And then I think every one of our employees have gone the extra mile during the pandemic. And so I realize that I've tried to methodically go through this and be as fair and consistent as possible.
And I guess my last question.
Yes, sir.
Because you do have custodials in Tier 1.
Yes, sir.
But, and this just goes back to, I guess, what Commissioner Keith said. Some of those don't work for us, but did the same thing. Or have we now, because at one point they were contract.
There are a handful or less that are still through contract. And they will not be included in this because we actually have some employees in other departments that are through temp agencies, and it will only include those that are employed.
Okay. I just want to make sure so that they will, that it's on the record, because they will know that their agencies should have compensated.
And for the record as well, the 3 positions that report directly to the board will not fall in a tier 1, 2, or 3, but are subject to an evaluation process that was just completed by the Board of Commissioners.
And those that were essential employees, what, in tier 1?
Everybody's everyone's essential.
But anyway, so I guess, are there any questions on this? And if not, I think that one of the reasons that the manager brought it to us is for payment purposes, so that it doesn't get caught up in the longevity pay, and then there'll be some more tax stuff. So I would entertain a motion that we take this recommendation and approve the recommendation.
I'll second your motion.
Commissioner Stewart made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Council. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
Thank you.
And before we move on to the updates, just so that I can have clearly our clerk, so that she doesn't get me for my stand-in for Commissioner Evans, because he does a good job. I would entertain a motion that all of those things that were, as Mr. Booth said, that we unanimously voted on be moved to the consent agenda. If I can get that as a motion.
That's my motion.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Stewart. All those in favor? Okay, now, Madam Clerk, you had a question?
Was the motion taken under 5B?
Oh, wait a minute.
That was the manager's recommendation for,
The pandemic pay.
does that go forward on the consent agenda?
Yes, because that was unanimous, yes. Madam Manager, you had your hand up for one other thing.
Oh, no, I was just moving to the monthly report.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
sir. You've been provided with the financial reports, the health insurance update, project update. Vicki may want to say a word or two about health insurance. If you look at the graph that's attached, our health insurance is still for the 3rd month in a row, I believe, Vicki, that is historically high.
And it is 3 months in a row. We are at an average of 2.5 million, which we have not had in the past 5 years.
2.5 million each month.
Yes.
Average.
Is that COVID related or
Average
just,
of 2.5 million. There's,
or claims that were
it's
ongoing?
claims. Oh, I mean, claims are high. There are COVID claims in those claims, but Blue Cross attributes it, and USI attributes it mostly to people returning to the doctors and elective surgeries after the pandemic.
So what does that do to our annual rate? Well, you said the last 3 months. So are we talking about the beginning of this fiscal year? How is this fiscal year actuarying out to last fiscal year?
$1 million higher.
But I think you got to be careful, because the last 50 years of the pandemic and people were at home and weren't doing any of those surgeries. Even some of the things that they needed to do, they didn't do. So it would be comparison to 19 to me and 21, maybe.
No, I think you still get the
It's
code. You
still
still get the
similar.
code.
So the monthly average for 19 and 21 is about 1.5 million.
Okay, the monthly average. So what you're telling me is we are on track right now to be $12 million more in the annual health and insurance than we were last year. Right now, that's what the numbers are showing, and you're at 2.5 million.
That is true.
That, when you put it that way, well, here come increases.
Everybody's going to have
Look at the terms.
damn, man, that's a whole nother story. Anything else, Madam Manager?
No, sir.
That should shock you.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. Get a second. It's been moved to second that we adjourn on that bad news. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
That was bad.